All right, I'm mindful of the time and that we never have enough time in these events to actually get through everything. So I will kick us off. Hi, everyone. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, although I do see many familiar names in the chat, my name's Laura, and I'm the founder and executive director of Women Who Lead. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's event on Overcome Failure. Extra credit to those of you who got the song reference in our title. For those of you who don't know, Women Who Lead is a volunteer-led organization with the mission to passionately engage, educate, and empower women leaders. The content we offer as a network helps to equip women with the skills they need to advance their careers and pursue positions of leadership. That being said, we are on a mission to be an increasingly inclusive organization, so we don't limit our events to those who identify as women. Our events are open to any and all individuals who are looking for a safe space to have these types of conversations. We hosted our first virtual event in June 2020, which feels like forever ago, and we've really enjoyed the exponential growth we've seen since, as evidenced by some of our friends outside of Ontario and Canada that are joining us today. Because of you, we've been able to amplify our contribution to support women in their career advancement and leadership pursuits. And I would be remiss in my role as the executive director if I didn't put out a call at the beginning for your thoughts on potential topics, people who would be brilliant speakers, and network sponsorship opportunities, as most of our support comes through our network members. So with that being said, we will open up the conversation for today's topic, and I'm joined by three brilliant panelists, Christine, Irene, and Mame. And although I could go through their sort of formal bios and impressive accomplishments myself, I think it'll be much more beneficial for the group for you to hear directly from them, a little bit about them, and then we'll dive right in. So Mame, I'll start with you.
Perfect. Am I audible?
You are audible, yes.
Wonderful. So hi, everyone. My name is Mame Efwadihir. I am a policy analyst with the Government of Canada, primarily with the Mental Health of Black Canadians initiative. And what we're doing is we're committed to building the evidence and enhancing community-led, culturally focused mental health interventions that tend to address mental health and its determinants for diverse Black communities across Canada. Simultaneously, I'm also a clinical research analyst with a kidney health and research group at University Network, primarily at Toronto General Hospital, whereby I'm leading the qualitative research team to understand and reduce barriers to transplantation amongst African, Caribbean, and Black communities. Lastly, what I personally love to do is I have my own grassroots initiative called the Power of Love Foundation Canada, where I'm looking to provide services and resources for Black Canadians, especially within the Ghanaian community here in Canada. However, if I'm not doing anything work-related or school-related, as I recently graduated with my master's in public health, I tend to fake my own talk shows. So I was sharing with Laura and Christine and Irene recently. I love Oprah Winfrey. So when I'm in my room, I use my pillows and my bed as my audience. And I tend to pretend that I'm hosting my own talk show and interviewing people. So that's something I personally love to do. And thank you, Laura, and to the Women Who Lead team for putting together such an exemplary panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mame. Over to you, Irene.
Hi, everyone. My name is Irene Duokesi. I am of Ghanaian descent, and I currently work at Across Boundaries, which is a mental health center where I'm leading food security and mental health work to address the needs within the Black community in Toronto. I also started a grassroots organization called Rise in STEM, and the goal is to just support more young Black students or marginalized youth who are interested in STEM pathways, which is really rooted in my personal experiences growing up and going through academia. And currently I'm a fellow alongside with Mame in the Leading Social Justice Fellowship at the University of Toronto. And when not in school or doing work, I enjoy nature. My master's was in sustainability management, and a lot of that work was around environmental health. And so my environmental interests are around birding and birds. And so when I'm not doing this work, I enjoy birding, and I'm also currently trying to learn French. And so yeah, that's a bit about me, and I'm excited to be part of this panel and talk about all things overcoming failure.
Awesome. Christine, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So Christine Allen, I have been a professor at the University of Toronto for almost 20 years. I always feel pretty old when I say that. I'm now in a senior leadership role here as Associate Vice President, Vice Provost Strategic Initiatives. I also run a research group that's focused in the area of pharmaceutical sciences, or more specifically, drug delivery. Outside of work, I have 3 kids, 2 of whom spent considerable time in the foster care system. On the side, I'm an advocate for children and youth who are in foster care or aging out of care, and very much involved with a program called Never Too Late for a Family. And this program is seeking to provide permanence to youth who are aging out of care. Besides that, I am an avid exerciser. I spin most mornings at home, and I love candy. So if you know me, I always have candy on my desk, candy in my drawer, and I say it's for my students, but in fact, it is also very much for me.
Amazing. I'll have to stop myself from going down the sort of food focused pathway, because I feel like every time people ask me to introduce myself and say something interesting, I just start talking about how much I love all food groups, candy included. All right, I will not so covertly look over at question number 1, and we'll jump right into it. So can you describe a time when you felt like you failed and reflect back on how you grew as a result? And Christine, we'll start with you.
It's not hard for me to recall a time, because I would say that there's so many kinds of failures. There are small failures, medium-sized failures, catastrophic failures. There's failures in my personal life, failures in my professional life. And so, I don't know if it's, and I don't know if it's only failures, it's also rejections, which can often feel the same. I can tell you that a time when I really felt that I was failing was actually right after going from kind of 0 to 2 kids in our family. So I was trying to be a mom, and at the same time trying to run my research group, and didn't actually feel that I was doing well at anything. So I actually felt like a failure professionally and a failure personally. One of the things that got me through that time, someone said to me at some point, Christine, your good is good enough. So it wasn't my best is good enough. My definition of best had to change, or good had to change, and it was my good is good enough. And I still say this to myself today. So the times when I've dropped my son off at school, and everyone's in a costume and he's not in a costume, and you leave the school feeling like you're going to burst into tears, and you've got to go to work and give a lecture, so you don't have time to burst into tears. I just say to myself, your good is good enough. And so I found that I also just look back on those times in my life and all of these different failures. And so when I am going through or experiencing another failure, I'm like, I got through the last one of the last 5,000. So I am also going to get through this, and my good is good enough.
That's such a fantastic way to start, Christine. I'm going to pick up on 2 pieces as we hand the mic over to Irene. And those 2 pieces are, one, the sort of intersecting identities that all of us as panelists and everyone that's joined this conversation has, and how that shows up. And we can't disentangle those identities for any one topic, whether it's failure or imposter syndrome, the last topic that we tackled as a group. And the second is really around the sort of strategy you highlighted in terms of, in moments of anxiety, tension, stress, or when you're sort of steeped in that failure, to remind yourself that you have overcome similar things, whether it's emotionally or literally in terms of the rejection, which happens all the time in our world, at least for scientists, that having that sort of perspective and being able to remind yourself of that is one strategy you can rely on to get through that period. But Irene, over to you.
So when I think about, I guess, a time that I failed, I often think about my first year of undergrad. So that was about maybe 6 years ago, and it was a really, really tough transition for me. I went to McMaster University, and so it was my first time away from home. I grew up and I went to high school in the Etobicoke Rexdale area, and so I was always around Black folks, racialized newcomer people, and I never really saw myself as a minority or really understood what those concepts of imposter syndrome or marginalization really meant. And so moving to a predominantly white institution like MAC came with its challenges socially, academically. For one, there wasn't many Black students that lived in my resident, were in my courses. Maybe sometimes I was the only one. I know there was only one Black professor in my department whom I never really took her course. And also, coming from a different cultural, socioeconomic background and being first generation, it was challenging to understand how to engage with my peers, faculty, and even the learning material itself was quite daunting. And I had a difficult time adjusting to that setting, to the university setting where I found myself always running back home. And I never really did well in my courses, where at the end of the school year, when most folks were, choosing their major, I was told that I wasn't able to continue at the university because my grades were so poor. And at that point, the decision was quite final. And the only way to continue was to go through what they called the reinstatement process. And I remember trying to figure this out on my own because I was so embarrassed. I felt so much shame for essentially failing before I really got started. And eventually I was able to consult my mom, who connected me with a leader from our church. And she really sat with me, helped me put the language together, and helped me gain an understanding of what I was going through. And with her support, thankfully I was able to submit an application and be accepted and choose courses like nothing really happened. But how I grew from that experience, it really humbled me because high school subjects came easy, math didn't, and it really taught me to just break down the way that I do my work. It also helped me to understand the way I learn best, and it helped me become more aware of who I was as a person, being more in tune with my identities, which helped me engage more meaningfully with my work on a different level. And also, it taught me the importance of just asking for help and finding my community. Like, it was always hard for me to do that for some reason. And being able to just co-create student clubs with my peers, volunteering in labs, helped me practice that opening up and seeing that I wasn't alone, and then being able to better express when I needed support before it got too late.
So many pearls I could pull out of that, and one that I want to touch on, and Rishma, I hope I pronounced that correctly, posted an HBR article in the chat that I saw not too long ago. I'm sure some of you might have seen it as well, around stop telling women they have imposter syndrome. So this dovetails nicely from our last event, but part of what came up, Irene, in your sort of struggle around failure points to the sort of bias and exclusion and systemic issues that create feelings of self-doubt or failure, and how reconnecting with others or those that support you, and in your case a religious leader, can help, is another strategy to help overcome experiences of failure. And the other thing that I love about your answer, and I hope I'm quoting you accurately, but I'm sure it represents it, is that you talk about getting to a point where you are more in tune with who you were as a person, which makes me a little bit envious, because it took me much longer in my life than it took you to get to that point. And as I reflected, as panelists, we usually meet once before the event. And when we were chatting, I reflected with the panelists that one of the biggest failures, but I'm going to reframe it as a realization in my life, was not being clear on who I was and what I wanted to do and what really sort of lit me up. And once I could identify that, which took a little bit of self-reflection and a lot of conversations, many with individuals who are joining us today, that frame and self-understanding made it easier for me to be like, this isn't a failure. I don't care about this thing. You know, it helps you orient yourself towards what really matters. And then when I did experience and continue to experience rejection or failure, it became an opportunity to learn how to better pursue my goals or realize what I wanted to professionally or personally in line with who I was. And it didn't, so all that to say, it didn't feel like failure so much when I really was invested in the outcome and working towards that goal. And it sounds, Irene, whether that resonates with you completely or not, that you've either had that journey or are continually on it, which is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
You are most welcome. Thank you. Mame, over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura, for that question. A particular time where I thought I did not think I failed, I actually failed. And this was during my undergraduate studies. I did my bachelor's degree at Brock University. And growing up, I always thought I wanted to be a physician. Primarily, I thought I was either going to be a gynecologist or a pediatrician. So when it came to selecting a program for my undergrad, I chose health sciences because I believed it was going to pave the way for me to get into medical school, or so I thought. So I recall when we were selecting the program, my mom, shout out to her, she's actually on the call right now. She advised me and she said, no, I don't think you should go the medical stream. I think you should go for public health. But me thinking I knew it all, just diverted and still chose health sciences. Lo and behold, I did go into the program for health sciences, and my first 2 years were challenging. I failed horribly. I failed to the point where the school was like, we actually cannot keep you in the program because your grades are so poor. Subsequently, what happened was I was actually removed from the health sciences program. And as a young undergrad student, and I'm sure many of us here are either high school, undergrad, postgraduate, wherever stage in your academic journey you are in, hearing that news from your school is devastating. No student ever wishes that. I thought it was the end of the world. I said, I was done. This is it for me. I did not only think that I had failed myself, but I thought I had failed my family and the people that were looking up to me most. So when my department removed me from the health sciences program, they gave me two options. And one of them was to go into the public health program, which my mother had formally suggested and I disobeyed. So now the public health program was now a 4-year program, and that would mean I would have to start all over again. However, with resilience, I was able to complete the 4-year program in 2 years and still complete on time. Now, how has this made me grow? Post bachelor's, I was now able to go to University of Toronto and complete my master's in public health, and I am currently working in the Public Health Agency of Canada. This situation really helped me grow because it particularly reminds me of a quote by American industrialist who is the late Henry Ford that says, failure is the only opportunity more intelligently to begin again. And this resonates with me because I was at a point where I was at a crossroads. I had just failed horribly and I had to now start all over again. But failure was part of that process. I had to go through the process of failing, starting all over again, but using resilience, skills, and knowledge to complete my program in a more feasible time frame. More so also, I know most of us are here either making decisions on either our school or undergrad, and Laura and Irene stated something so significant. It comes to a point where you're quite unsure of where to go, what program to do, and you're basically unsure in making a decision. In that process, it's highly expedient to seek the advice of the people around you because most of the times you are actually not sure of your own capabilities and skills that you possess, but the people around you are able to detect that and say, okay, for example, Laura, I see that there's something about you that you might need to go into the sciences field, and please do not ignore that. So I would just say that it has really helped me grow by being resilient, building my capacity, and also being more aware of the people around me that provide wise counsel.
So many things to pick up on, and one of them dovetails nicely to our next question. But one of the things I want to point out, which I'm sure is already highlighted for those joining us today, is that you know, what you see on paper or what you see on LinkedIn, social media, what have you, is maybe like 10% of the story. You know, you're sort of seeing where people are or where they have been when you see a snapshot of their career, or even when you know, in Christine's case, when you see a family photo, let's say, but you don't see how they got to that point. And one of the common threads that the Women Who Lead community particularly enjoys connecting around is sort of the shared experiences that we could sit here for the rest of this conversation and talk about all of the times we've failed in every aspect of our life, and how we've dealt with that. So while I encourage both our panelists and the attendees to continue to share and sort of give space for airing out some of those failures and leaving them behind in our conversation today, we'll transition to question number 2. So what we're going to talk about now is how we can reframe failure when it can feel so intense. So even in our first question, we address a couple of different strategies. So thinking about the failures you've overcome in the past, being clear on who you are and how you want that to show up. And it helps you reframe, as Mame put it, the opportunities that you can see in failure. So I welcome, as we go through the panelists, you're welcome to highlight a different failure, if you so choose, to attach a strategy to it to make it a little bit more salient. But whatever spin you take will be great. So Mame, we're going to start this question with you.
Sounds good. I think personally for me, one of the ways in which I've been able to reframe failure, especially when it feels so intense, is to just embrace it. Because I'm now acknowledging that in order to be successful, you need to fail at a point. And that's the only time that you're going to actually learn and gain some lessons from it, whether it be in your mental, physical, psychological, or even your social life. Personally, one of the techniques and strategies that I have adopted anytime I fail is I have a Word document where anytime I fail or I make a mistake, I actually note it down. And I do this personally because I sometimes think that, okay, what if I go on an interview? I apply for something and I get called in and they ask me, when was the time you failed? Or can you tell us a point where your weakness was demonstrated in your workplace or even in your personal life? I know I'm able to pull out that story or that mistake that I kept in a note on my computer and use that experience even during the interview room. So personally for me, I tend to reframe failure as a way to just embrace it, take note of it, and know that failure does not ideally define who I am. It's more so how I'm able to rise from that failure. You know, sometimes within failure is something we're all familiar with, which is the 4-letter word fear. Majority of us are so scared to fail. And I know sometimes there's 2 acronyms for fear, and I hope I don't forget this. It's the 2 acronyms are: 1, you can either face everything and rise, or forget everything and run. It's your choice. So I obviously we all want to succeed. So it's expedient that when we're faced with failure or we're even scared to fail, we have to face everything and rise, because that's the only way success will be produced.
I love that so much. I just screamed it in the chat, but I will definitely use that later. One of the things that, and I don't know if this is a conscious choice on your part, Mame, but if we think about the field of positive psychology for a second, there's an externalization that happens when you mentioned that you have a document that you write down all of your failures in. There's an externalization that happens there, and whether you're writing them down in a journal or an electronic document or just saying them to someone other than yourself, there's a mechanism there that allows us to detach from some of the emotion, and everyone's strategies may be different. Some of us need to sit in that emotion, as you mentioned, you sort of embrace it and take it head on. But a couple of great strategies intertwined in there that hopefully people can reflect and consider, which of those strategies might work for you and in which types of scenarios. Sometimes it's much easier to sit with that emotion in one circumstance than it is in another. So I think one of the things that all of our panelists would agree with is that it's not a one size fits all approach for individuals, but also not a one size fits all approach across individuals. So hopefully throughout our conversation, you'll feel like you have a couple of tools in your toolkit. Okay, Christine, over to you. I'll repeat the question just in case. How do we reframe failure when it feels so intense? And what strategies or techniques could we use to do that?
So it's a great question. I think as a scientist, I've gotten better at dealing with failure because I'm actually failing more than I'm succeeding. I mean, I'm a wet lab scientist, so we've got experiments probably right now that are running in the lab that aren't working. Papers are being rejected, grants are likely going to be rejected. And then I dropped my son off at school this morning. We probably forgot something. So there's all of these different things that are going on constantly. My big thing is not to dwell on failure. So I do always try to learn from it, but at the same time, I don't dwell and don't spend that much time kind of looking backwards. Learn from it and kind of shake it off and move on. And I think my two boys are hockey players and they're both defensemen. If you've got hockey players or you like hockey, you'll get this. The closer you are to the net, whether you're defenseman or goalie, likelihood is when the goal is scored against you, it's your fault. And so, when they started playing hockey, they would get pretty upset when a goal was scored against them. In particular, people were yelling or whatever at them. And I used to say to them, you've got to shake it off. It's all in how you react to it. You've got to keep going. And so I'm kind of started to take my own advice a little bit, and it's like, you learn from it, so that, hopefully don't make the same mistake again, but, you don't dwell on it and you move on. And I also, on the same line of thinking, I actually really like to challenge myself, because I think in challenging yourself, you're putting yourself out there, you're going to be a little uncomfortable, but you're likely growing. And I want to grow. I want growth opportunities. When you're putting yourself out there, you're challenging yourself, there's a higher likelihood or probability of failure. So they kind of go hand in hand. So I also think, if I'm doing everything well and I'm succeeding all of the time, I'm probably not, putting myself out there enough or giving myself opportunities to grow. So it's also, I'm failing. It's a sign that, we're trying to do new things here. I'm trying to do new things here, and this is okay. And I'm going to learn from it and grow from it. And I've just got to shake it off and keep going.
I love that. And even though it's sort of part of our title, the more we chat about it, the more it sort of crystallizes for me around when the target or the goal or the desired outcome is growth, failure is like you expect it. It's sort of I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the tech industry sort of fail fast mentality. And it's expecting that, we aren't perfect. We won't have it figured out. If this is all in pursuit of growth, whether it be growth of your skill set, growth of your relationships, growth of your career, to get there, there's going to be missteps. That's how you figure things out. And Christine, to use your example as a wet lab scientist, sort of failed experiments are how we know which doors to close and which paths to go down. And so was I wise enough earlier in my career to feel this way? Most certainly not. But now, every time something doesn't go well, I ask myself, do I care about what I would have achieved here? And if I care, then what can I learn from this to go forward? And if I don't care, then I just learned that I don't care, and I won't put myself in that situation again. And I'm not saying that it's that simple, but often for me, it's a pretty easy barometer for whether or not I'm willing to invest in learning from this, because I also want to be clear that not every failure is something there's an intense learning opportunity for. Sometimes learning opportunity can be as quick as, this does not matter to me, or this doesn't serve me, or this isn't a healthy relationship, or this isn't an opportunity that I'm interested in. So just to be clear that the sort of timeline of learning or the amount of learning to be done will also vary across opportunities. Irene, over to you.
Yeah, I agree with everything Mohammed and Christine said. Failure is so valuable. And for me, the way I try to reframe it is kind of thinking about it as part of the balance in this journey towards growth and success, and understanding like the balance isn't like straight or linear, it has its up and downs. And for somebody or listening to talk and somebody kind of compared that balance to like the stock market or the economy, I mean, I still struggle with reading those graphs, but we know they tend to look like this because with everything, like there's always the natural high and the natural low. And also kind of thinking about things like you can't necessarily increase it without any sort of limitation. And, you know, that really stuck with me in terms of my own journey and realizing that I can't necessarily grow unless I reach that limit and I continue to push and persevere despite what that limit may have looked like. And I think that idea in itself is greater and more valuable than whatever the failure is. And a strategy that I try to use, I think somebody said in the chat, Marlena, kind of just leaning into your small wins and just celebrating that. And like what Mommy had mentioned, kind of taking notes, not just notes of like the failures, but like just the little things that we do throughout the day, those little ideas. And that helps me kind of hold on to my natural visions and observing myself. And after kind of looking back on that, you're kind of less hard on yourself because you realize that you're already doing so much in so many different ways for like even little things like, you know, making breakfast or making your bed. I think it's important to count those little things that are important to make ourselves feel good as wins. And I recognize that because like as people, we do live off of validation. So trying to validate yourself or myself keeps me going rather than kind of looking for it elsewhere and comparing what my success looks like compared to what other people's ideas or opinions of success look like. And recognize or just I've come to realize that like, you know, no one really knows me like me. And so just using myself as that benchmark of success and challenging my own limits, like what Christine had said, kind of helps reduce that pressure when failure could feel so intense.
So I just was making notes like the nerd that I am, and I'll pop them in the chat of some of the strategies that we identified, and feel free everyone to add to it. I loved the note about not comparing yourself to others, and it's a trap that I imagine most of us have fallen into. And there's that fear of missing out, and you know, should I be pursuing this grant, this publication, this job, this you know, should I be trying to find a relationship right now, whatever that might look like. And then this links to another point, Irene, that you've brought up a few times around sort of knowing yourself and reflecting. And oftentimes, if you stop and think about it, sometimes you're like, well, I don't want to be Christine. I can't be. I'm not a wet lab scientist, so I can't hold myself to the same standards and accomplishments that she has. And even within a given title or role, which is often what makes these comparisons challenging, there's so much variability that, you know, our desire as humans to categorize and compare can work against us in this regard. The other thing that I loved around celebrating the wins is that if we can reframe, so let's take, I'm sorry that I keep going back to scientist examples, but it's the world that I live in. If you apply for a grant or submit a paper and they're rejected, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Like instead reframe that as celebrating, wow, I submitted a grant. Like I collaborated with people, I put this together, or I wrote a paper, or I pitched an idea to my boss. Maybe they shut it down, but like I had the confidence and the skills to put that together, and they had the, you know, they were interested to listen. And so if we can just try to, one of the strategies can just be like, okay, let me switch the positive, from the negative to the positive. And I wonder, Mame, if you're documenting your failures includes documenting how you react to them. Because I think that for me, and I am hopeful and wouldn't be surprised if most of this community can, this resonates with you, but often I'm my biggest judge and my own worst critic. And the first thing I do when I fail is self-critique. And so although it is challenging, I'm trying to get out of that cycle. And one of the strategies I use to do that is I often text our research manager, Carolyn, and that's my safety net. Is I text her that thought and she helps me. That's all I have to control, is texting someone else, and they can help me get out of that frame. But Mame, curious to hear as a follow-up if you do or have thought about documenting your reactions to your failures.
I think that's such a good thing you pinpointed out, because I actually do not document my reactions, but I live in the moment of my reactions, if that makes sense. So I can give an ideal example. This morning, actually, I made a mistake at work. And my manager pointed it out to me, and she said, Mame, just make sure that you're not doing this and that. And when she said that, I smiled. And I think she did not expect that reaction. And I was so proud of myself, because after that situation, I sat there and I said, the Mame 5 years ago would have, at the end of the meeting, sat there, cried, beat myself up, probably call my mom again, cry again, um, go buy food, binge eat, beat myself up again, and so on. But I got to see the growth in how I was able to, face that and take that. Although it did not feel good, my reaction to it was quite different. And for me, I enjoyed it because it showed me how much I have grown. And I know most of the times, we say it all the time, especially when it comes to personal development, that it doesn't matter what happened, what matters is your reaction to it. So I thank you for that hint to also, take note of my reaction. Although I do it in the moment, it's also expedient that I take record of it. So thank you very much, Laura.
Yeah, but I mean, you just highlighted in and of yourself the ability to reflect, and being another mechanism over time to see how far you've come, which is a growth moment and a positive in and of itself. So since we've all had time to reflect on our failures and are probably still reflecting on them, let's imagine for a moment that we could rewrite the past. What advice would you give to your younger self? Irene, we'll start with you.
So the advice I would give my younger self, I would tell myself to plan ahead, but also realize that the plan can change, and that is okay. Because going into my undergrad, just like Mama had mentioned, and in most African households, the dream is for their kids to go be a doctor or a nurse and do something in healthcare. And at the time when I finished high school, I had it all mapped out. I'm going to get in, do my MCAT second year, third year, get into medical school before 25, be practiced by 30. But the reality was that I got kicked out essentially my first year, and the hope for medicine had died because of that self-doubt. And even though I didn't really know what I was going to get into, or I didn't really have conversations with people about other possible pathways, luckily it came natural because I followed my interest and my passion. But for a really long time, throughout my undergrad, I was unsure of where I was going. And I even took a fifth year because I just needed to decide on postgrad. So I would tell my younger self to plan ahead, to have that clear sense of direction, but it's also okay to be unsure about your purpose, and to never feel like you're wasting your time, because the journey in itself will shape you as you go along, as long as you stay open to new opportunities, stay open to the new people that you connect with and the ideas that pass you by. And looking back, being able to kind of connect the dots now, it just makes sense that it was supposed to happen that way. But had I been more aware and maybe a bit more proactive, I could have appreciated that growth during those failing moments, because it really does prepare you for so much more after, for what life has to offer afterwards.
Excellent. I'm going to be fairly brief on my transition because you're all going to hear my 1-year-old crying in the background. So Mame, we're going to pass it over to you.
That's okay. So I think if I were to reflect on my failures, the way I would rewrite my past will be in an acronym that I will call REST. So R stands for relax. Honestly, just relax. Everything will come together. You know, sometimes we tend to, as we've already mentioned, compare ourselves to people. And I saw one comment, and it was interesting that I had actually written it down too. We compare our chapter 1 to someone's chapter 20 or chapter 10, forgetting that that person has had to go through failures, that person has had to go through disappointments to get to where they are. And you are just at the beginning stages of either your academic journey or your career. So it's expedient that you're not comparing yourselves to people, because life is a process. Personally, for me, because I tend to blog a lot of on LinkedIn, I have a lot of young people reaching out to me, you know, asking me, how do I blog like you? How do I become like you? And I'm like, you really don't want to, because I've had to go through it. But I think the message I'm trying to send across is it's expedient that you embrace the growth and the process in which you're going through. For one, I cannot compare myself to Christine, because Christine has a ton of experience. Neither can I compare myself to Laura or even Irene, who's my colleague, because she probably has her own individual experiences that has brought her to the level at which she is. I would say my E in the REST acronym is engage. Don't be an island. I know right now we're supposed to socially distance, but I always say this: socially distance, but don't socially isolate. Engage with people, engage with your network. At this point that we're all literally on our laptops and phones, find a way to either build your LinkedIn profile and communicate with people. Those are some of the ways of honing in on your skills. So engaging with the people around you, especially virtually, is one of the best ways to, you know, not only experience things, but learn from their experiences as well. My S will be seek opportunities. Ooh, I I have grown to realize that opportunities do not just fall on your lap. Most importantly, you have to go for it. Try to find opportunities in everything. I'm gonna share a trick with you. So a lot of people ask me, how come I get, you know, engagements and speaking engagements, and I'm here and there? One of the things I do is, besides me posting my personal experiences on LinkedIn, which is actually how Laura reached out to me to be on this panel, I find opportunities in everything. So perhaps maybe you might have seen a flyer on, let's say, LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, where an event is being promoted on, you know, let's say perhaps young racialized women, and it's a mentorship program. One of the things you can do is email the program director and say, hey, I just saw that there's this mentorship program going on. These are my expertise. How can I also bring value to this program by either being a mentor or either supporting in the establishment of the program? These are ways where you seek opportunities, and then you're able to grow, learn from experiences, and develop your network. And lastly, my T. My T is synonymous to my R. Take a break. Don't beat yourself up. Life is not a rush. You know, as Africans, we have this quote, and I know we're in a professional space, but I have to say it. I can't come and kill myself. You know, it's a quote where we say that you're not going to stress yourself so much to the point where you're drained and cannot do anything. So it's important and it's expedient to take a break for your own physical and, most importantly, mental well being. And I finally leave us with a quote on how I'll rewrite my past. And that is from Coco Chanel. And it says, success is most achieved by those who don't know that failure is inevitable. Thank you very much.
I feel like we need like a mic drop.
Yeah.
It just sounds like you need to be like, and okay. All right. I'm going to wait until the end to summarize, but there were so many things. And also, Mommy, if you're comfortable, and I'm surprised that no one did it, do you want to pop your REST acronym into the chat, and then people can people can write it down for future reference for those that find it useful. Christine, over to you.
So advice to my younger self, or something I wish I'd done differently, I guess. I would tell myself, I wish I had been easier on myself. So I was a very harsh critic, I think. And it took me a while really to realize this. And it was somebody actually saying to me, you know, you're so supportive of your students and your colleagues and your children, and then look at how you talk to yourself. And I think that is very common. You know, you think of the kindness, warmth, patience that we have or share with others, and then think of our own patience, kindness, warmth with ourselves. And yet there's only one me. I only have one life. And I think at times when I was too difficult on myself, I missed out on a lot of joy. And life goes by so quickly, you know, and really precious years. Like I said to you, when I was working and I just had the kids, and I missed out on some really precious moments because I was beating myself up about not spending more time on a grant, or forgetting to bring a costume to school, and in the end, did any of this really matter? You know, do I even remember what the grant was about now? No. So, you know, or what the costume was supposed to be? No. So, you know, if I had advice for my younger self, it would be just take life, you know, more in stride, be easier on yourself, be good to yourself, treat yourself as well as you treat other people around you. And, you know, just make sure you don't miss out on those precious moments and that joy, because you can't get them back. And so I still talk to myself about that now. And I think of our youngest now is 11, and, you know, they grow up so quickly. As a mom, I guess, I'm sorry if I'm sure some of you are also moms. I know some of you aren't. And so, but it's just part of, you know, my life. You know, so I think about it a lot, and I don't want to miss out on those moments. So I don't want to rush through life beating myself up because I didn't achieve this or I didn't achieve that. So I've just got to take it one day at a time and be proud of who I am and what I've achieved, accept my failures, and make sure that I'm living like my best life, living it, you know, and enjoying it, embracing it, and not just beating myself up.
As always, a lot of threads I could pick up on. And one of the quotes that sticks with me a lot is, many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. And, you know, it kind of picks up on the theme of perspective that we've been talking about across the panel, but also as I was listening to you, Christine, and resonance, like, you know, just feeling like, yes, that's me in a lot of what you were saying. Even with that quote I just gave, it's how we define success. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard the saying that, like, you know, your accomplishments and your titles don't go with you when you die. Neither do your failures. That's not going to be on your sort of, you know, tombstone or what have you, or in your obituary. And so sort of reframing in other words, what Christine had just said, it really is about who you are, the difference you make, the impact you have. And it doesn't, you know, how you define that can be in a lot of different ways. It can be the impact on the people that you connect with. It can be impact realized through your career. It can be impact realized through raising a family to be, you know, good citizens and respectful to others. And there isn't, not only are there different definitions of success, but for every individual, there's more than one. And so reminding ourselves of that, I think that's what I would say to my younger self. And what I should say to my current self is, like, slow down. I won't, but you can all keep me accountable for it, because it's a process that I'm actively working through. And that's just to acknowledge that none of the suggestions that we're tabling for you all are things that we expect are a light switch. If they are, that's great. But it really is a journey of understanding that if we're racing, do we even know what we're racing towards? And if you don't, then it's a pretty good signal that you should stop and reflect, as Irene said, on who you are and what matters to you. And then linking on what Mame had just said, once you know what matters to you, then you know what opportunities to pursue and where to find opportunities, where to look for them, what to take advantage of, because you will get to a point where there are more opportunities than you can hold. And you'll have to start making decisions about those opportunities. So recognizing that everyone that's joining us today is going to be at a different point in their career, in their life, what have you. Definitely lots to think about. There are a couple of questions that came up in the chat. So I'm going to pop a couple of them in, although I have a few of my own, but I'll hold those to see if we need them. The first question that came up is from Miriam. My fear of failure most of the time stops me from starting things and getting into a new field. Any suggestions around how to tackle that? The first thing that I would say, and then I mean, obviously now for the panel, feel free to jump in if you have thoughts, but from experience, if those things or that new field is something that resonates with who you are, you've done that sort of reflection and decided that either this very much matters to me or is something I would like to explore, because you could be in an exploratory phase where you aren't sure yet what path you want to go down. If you can answer yes to either one of those questions, then it's just a question of how to take that step, not whether to take that step. So that's my perspective. But with that being said, happy to hear from the rest of the panel of their thoughts of sort of stepping into something new.
Yeah, I'll just build on what Laura, you said about how, like, for example, with me, my background is in science and like doing the social work stuff. But since COVID and since we've all been more engaged in technology, I've been more interested in things like tech, machine learning, and that sort of thing. I don't have no background around it. I don't necessarily know anybody in it, but I remember coming across just like a small like research stipend. I think it was like $500 just to explore this for my interest. And so I think, like Mommy had said, seeking those types of opportunities that are kind of less demanding. It's not necessarily a job, but it just gives you the resources to kind of explore those things. So it was actually through U of T, and I was able to connect with a professor afterwards that does that work in machine learning. And now I have some kind of like understanding of it. I'm not necessarily going into it, but I think it helped open me to what that field could look like and help me kind of see myself in what that could mean. And it also helped me kind of understand the types of skills and experience I need to be in that field. I thought I had to be tech savvy, I have to be technical, but I don't necessarily have to be like that. And so just kind of seeking small opportunities to help you explore that. And I think through academic spaces, there's always those small different opportunities for you to be able to do that.
And great points, Irene. And I just realized upon reflecting that our panel is heavily weighted towards an academic sort of background from recent experiences. But similarly, if there aren't academic opportunities, having conversations with people in your network, reaching out to people on social media, and if you aren't comfortable reaching out to people, just figuring out what people in that industry are doing, to Irene's point. Like often we have a lot of assumptions based on the sort of surface level that we see about what's required to make a step in a different direction. But if we do a little bit more digging, sometimes you find out that people in every industry have a very wide range of skill sets. And this sort of links back to other conversations we've had in our Women Who Lead community around transferability of skills and thinking about how to market your skills more broadly than sort of what might seem like the niche area that you're working in. So more on that later, but Christine or Mame, any thoughts on this question?
Do you want to go, Mom? I can.
No, Christine, go.
Okay. Well, I would say, for me, I am in academia, but I don't have any students who've graduated from my group that have gone into academia. So I don't know if that means I'm a failure, but they've all gone into industry, government, consulting, investment banking, and so on. And so, by definition, then when they compare themselves to me or from what they're learning from me directly in the research, they're going into different directions. And the way that I help them pursue those directions and determine which one might be for them is we set up some coffees and some networking opportunities. They go to conferences in those fields or kind of networking events or meetings. And I always say to them, if you ask someone for advice, no one's going to say no. Everybody will, but if you ask someone for a job, they may say no. You ask them for advice, they're going to say yes. And so that's, that's what I would say. And a number of them have started off and they'll say, I really want to go into the pharmaceutical industry. We'll set them up with a few people to talk to, and they decide actually they don't want to go into the pharmaceutical industry. And so, that's, I think, the idea of just small steps. And, you can see something from the outside. It can look very exciting and interesting. But I think it is important to actually take a closer look before you actually jump with 2 feet. And you can take a closer look. It's very easy to take a closer look, even during this time, virtual coffees, I think, as Mame said. So that's my advice. I think networking is so important, and just using your community to help you network and just take a small step maybe towards a new goal.
I think all my fellow panelists have basically said it all, but personally for me, I think just to add on to what everyone has said, it's expedient to surround yourself with like-minded people. For example, we were talking about this, and Irene, if I can share, Irene asked me yesterday, and as we were brainstorming on this, she was like, Mommy, does Laura know that we're really close? And I'm like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is that Irene and I are great friends. And with us both having our own grassroots initiative, we're able to rely on each other when we need help and support. There are times when I'm writing grants and I really do not know what to say. And I call Irene, I'm like, Irene, I'm stuck. How do I frame this? What kind of language do I use? And she's like on it, and vice versa. So as Christine, Lauren, and Irene has said, it's expedient to network with people that, are in the same industry or sector that you're interested in being in. Also, sometimes I feel like within our own circle, we forget that the people surrounding us are also in certain industries that we might be interested in being in. But because they're so close to us, we tend to overlook it. So just look around you. There's some people in government, science, and so on that just because you're your friends, you don't really take note that these people can also be a good network resource for you. So I would say it's important to just surround yourself around like-minded people who have a similar vision and goal as you do.
And I just want to add to Mama's point. I remember being at a conference and someone had said it's really important to network across rather than networking up, because often we think we need to be connected with the CEOs and those senior folks. But if you network with people like at the same type of not level as you, but in the same type of process as you in the journey, as they move up, you kind of move up with them, and you guys are all kind of able to support each other in ways that folks that are higher level may not have the capacity to do so. And so, yeah, I just wanted to add that in there.
Brilliant addition, and couldn't agree more that one of the things that I always say to people is to curate your circle. And this will dovetail nicely to our next question, but you sort of curate your circle in all directions. It's people who are at similar phases and stages to you. It's people who maybe represent where you might want to go. And to be honest, within the last year or two, I've also deliberately curated my circle with those who are junior to me, because I have so much to learn from people that have fresh perspectives and are sort of experiencing, my world or, professional aspects of healthcare in a different way than I am. And so I don't really think that there's anyone to exclude from your network. And this segues nicely. I have to go find the comment again. Okay. All right. So the question, is how do you balance vulnerability and sharing your experiences with failure as part of who you are with presenting as a competent professional without undermining yourself? I think this is difficult for those who are early career and those who are still trying to establish themselves. Deep breath, especially in the area of social media and personal branding. Couldn't agree more. And why I think it's a nice segue is that, so I'll make 2 points, and then I'm confident our panel will have thoughts on this too. I have said a few times to this network that I am not smart enough, nor do I have the energy to be multiple people. And I constantly, I'm a fairly transparent person, and I wonder whether and how that comes off to others, and if that comes off in conflict with what some of my goals are. And I've just decided that I will deal with those failures as they come up if being authentic and transparent lands the wrong way. But we've also talked about well-being and rest, and showing up that way. I grow into it over time, but it's just who I am. And if that doesn't resonate with people, that's fine. But that's sort of my filter for who's in my network, and who I'm drawn to. And as a result of that, the relationships I have and the workspaces that I'm in are more positive because I can be myself. And I recognize that there are a lot of sort of systemic barriers that make it easier for a white woman like me to feel that way than some of my colleagues may. But I can only speak from my experience. So happy to hear from others. But I do feel like it's individualized. So I perhaps am at not an extreme end, but at towards the end of the continuum, where on my social media feeds, and obviously in these conversations, you'll hear me talk about my kids. You'll hear me talk about random things that might seem completely unrelated to a professional topic. But bringing my whole self to any interaction, the same as I bring my work self to personal interactions sometimes, is just who I am. So very, very curious to hear what our panelists think about this question.
Yeah, a lot of what you said, Laura, I definitely resonate with. I think being vulnerable and transparent helps you be more relatable to folks. And if some people are not able to accept that transparency, it's better for you to know that earlier. And like you said, you can filter out those folks in your network. But I guess another way I try to balance being vulnerable, but also kind of, I guess not, I think the word was without undermining yourself, is kind of setting boundaries around what it is I can be transparent and not transparent about. So for example, like, I can share certain aspects about like my family journey, but maybe not the details of like my sister or my mom. So having like boundaries around what it is that I'm going to share, I think helps me have that balance of being vulnerable and transparent, but also protecting, myself in a way. But I definitely agree with what you said. I try to be transparent and authentic because when I'm in circles, I feel like what you put out is what you get. And so I want to be around people who can also be transparent and authentic with me. So I think it's really important to do so. But of course, having boundaries and I guess like, yeah, boundaries around how much you want to share and what it is that you share.
Yeah, that's a great point. The vulnerability and authenticity will look different depending on what you're comfortable with. And my level of vulnerability and authenticity now looks very different than it did 2 years ago, let alone 5 years ago. And it will look different from what it is in the future. So it's, again, tying back to that note of reflection that we've talked about throughout this conversation. It's sort of taking your own temperature or pulse in any given interaction, and seeing what feels appropriate and what you're comfortable with sharing, and not using other people as a barometer for what you should be doing. Christine?
Yeah, so I think for me, I recognize that I have a lot of privilege, and as a consequence, I think I feel the need to embrace that privilege and really use it responsibly. And it's my responsibility then, I think, to share some of the challenges that I've had, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life. And then also to share, importantly, how I've grown from them. And I think as women, oftentimes we can feel alone. Recently, and the whole social media thing it is hard to navigate all of this. Recently, Chrissy Teigen and John Legend had shared that they lost their pregnancy, right? And that was devastating. And there were people on the internet saying, why are they sharing this? It's too personal. They shouldn't be sharing this. And I am someone that had, we had a number of miscarriages, ectopic pregnancy, brutal time in my life. And I remember on a Friday being pregnant and lecturing in a lecture hall, and then going on Sunday having a miscarriage, coming in on Monday to lecture in the same lecture hall. So Friday I was pregnant in the lecture hall. Monday I was not pregnant in the same lecture hall. And it was brutal. And I could not share this with anyone. I didn't feel I could. And no one had shared with me, around me, that they'd had a miscarriage. And I felt just so alone. It was the most alone I'd ever felt in my life. And so I think if we can share our stories, there's so much power in sharing our stories and helping each other. And this is what I love about this, about Women Who Lead, is that we're sharing our stories. We're all on here today sharing our stories and listening. And there's so much power in that. And so many things that Mammy and Irene and Laura and others in the chat have said today, I will remember and probably use like months from now, right? I may not even think about it tomorrow, but it'll come back to me months from now. So, I think we have a responsibility to do that. And I don't really care if somebody thinks I'm sharing too much. Maybe that's because I'm a little older and I'm at a different stage in my life, but those are my thoughts on it.
I just want to pick up. I loved your connection, Christine, to, and it's not unique to women. It's not unique to any given identity, but how we can feel isolated. And I would almost reframe the question, Jennifer, around what do you prioritize? Because what your answer made me realize, Christine, is that I prioritize the connection and combating that isolation, what I hope combats that isolation for others and opens up a conversation more than I value, or it has a greater benefit to me than the potential risk to my career reputation. If it has a risk to my career reputation, hopefully it's not catastrophic, but again, whoever I frustrate, if I frustrate them, will they even remember this a month from now, a year from now? But I bet you the person who felt isolated and now feels connected to someone and they're no longer on an island, as Mame said earlier, will remember this for a really long time. And that impact matters much more to me personally than any impact it will have on my career. So again, not to be a broken record, circles back to knowing yourself and what matters to you. And full transparency, I'm putting these puzzle pieces together as we have this conversation. So I didn't necessarily have that clarity about why I enjoy being transparent, but that's the impact I want to have, is, however small the shift may be or however big it could potentially be, I'd rather, drop that rock into the pond and create a ripple effect than hold it tight and never see what could have happened. Mame, over to you.
I think with that powerful story Christine shared, I don't have anything to add on to it. She said it all, and I mean, we couldn't have been just more. And I just love Christine's vulnerability there. Truthfully, I'm still learning on how to be vulnerable, primarily because I've had hint, the Amanda's iPhone is actually my mom. The moment she came on, I knew it was her. So just continuing from that, I think I'm still learning in the process of how to be vulnerable and transparent, because in the past, I've had so many experiences where my vulnerability has been used against me, where I've been in workplaces where I've truthfully opened up and said, let's say I do not know how to do ABCD, I need help. And the reaction is, oh, how do you need help when you've been in this space for so long? I've had personal experiences where I actually opened up, and I share this story all the time, anytime we're talking about vulnerability, where I opened up to my own academic advisor on, let's say, I'm just going to give a day, let's say on Monday, and by Friday, there was already a meeting to kick me out of the program. So those experiences have made me, has shelved me off, because everyone talks about being vulnerable and being transparent. But then I look at myself and say, okay, instances where I have been vulnerable, they have sort of backfired against me. So it's still a learning process. And I like what both Christine and Irene have shared and said that, try to be vulnerable, know the boundaries, but if you are, it just shows that the people that you're speaking with are not the right people that are supposed to be around you. So I'd just like to add on to that.
Absolutely fantastic. And I think that I imagine, Christine, you're in the same boat, that for me, both through Women Who Lead and sort of what I'll call my day job, I'm fortunate to be in a position of leadership. And so I try to model that vulnerability. And although it is exceptional, I have doubt all the time when I step into that place, I'm hopeful that it has the intended effect of, even if it takes me being vulnerable 10 times, that Mame, someone like yourself who's maybe been burned before, starts to realize like this is a safe space for me to be vulnerable. And if I can make that difference for one person, that's enough for me. And if I can compound that over my lifetime in personal and professional situations, then great. It's all about making things easier for others, in parallel to in the pursuit of whatever I'm sort of going after. So I will transition to the next question because we have 15 minutes left, and I see that I have 20 new messages that I haven't looked at in the chat. So I imagine we won't get to them all. But the next question is, I am so impressed how all the panelists have social work, or what I might rephrase as sort of purpose-driven work that they're involved in. Any tips on how I can start being more involved in the community and be a part of causes, issues outside of myself? The only thing I'm going to add to this is that is sort of the question of like, why not? So people reach out to Women Who Lead all the time. I wish I had opportunities for all of them. But in terms of starting Women Who Lead, I was like, if I can have a conversation with 3 women who are interested in the same things, this will be great. And then I woke up to 250 emails. And so the question isn't, should I do this? It's what's stopping you? And you might surprise when it's a purpose-driven sort of social enterprise, you'll be surprised at how many other people are thinking the same thing you are. And then you find your people because it's purpose-driven. So happy to hand the mic over to, I mean, Mame, you're clapping. So I think we should hand it over to you, and then we'll make our way around.
Yes, I really resonate with what you said. And when I saw the question in the chat box, the same thing I said was, the answer I immediately gave was just start. I feel like sometimes we think too much into it. We want to have everything perfectly layered out. You're never going to get it perfect. In fact, I'm going to give a shout out to Irene publicly because she was the one that helped me start my own initiative. She had been there, she had experiences on how to start a grassroots initiative. So I remember she had seen a grant and she called me. She said, Mommy, I think, you've always shared with me that you had this idea of wanting to have your own grassroots organization. Why don't you apply for this grant? And in my head, I was just like, well, I don't have a logo. I don't have a website. I don't know what target population I know what I want to do, but I'm not quite sure. And she sat with me on the phone for hours. We literally wrote everything down, drafted everything. And that project impacted several single mothers in the Greater Toronto area. Just because, number one, I had a friend with me that was able to support me, that was able to, listen to the vision and mission that I had. And when she saw opportunities that aligned with me, she, just forwarded it and sent it to me. So as I keep going back to, it's important to know who is around you, because those are the same people that are going to help you, hold your hand, and pull you up. And whatever it is and whatever your purpose-driven idea is, just start. You can start by, it can start off like this. Maybe let's say, for example, I'm just going to give a very real example. You have passion on making cookies. All you need to do is you have the internet, you have your phone, you can just tweet, LinkedIn, Facebook post, whatnot, and just ask people who have the same purpose as you of wanting to make cookies, and you'll be surprised at the number of people that will connect with you. You get on Zoom, you network, and then you build it from there. And always remember that you're not always going to do this on your own. There are always people around to support you.
I also want to say, and then Irene, happy to hand it over to you. This community, so I think we have over 650 people on our mailing list. And so if you aren't on our mailing list, visit our website, which I'll put in the chat, and you can join it. If you want to start something and don't know how, email us. We will put out a call to our network, and I would be shocked if there's not someone in our network that will sit with you like Irene did, or connect you with someone who can sit with you. So like, if you don't know where to start here. We exist to connect people to other people that can help advance your interests. So all that to say, Irene, over to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on to what you and Mame said about just reaching out and connecting with folks that you're interested in their type of work and volunteering. I think volunteering is the first step to kind of just understand how things work and get comfortable with, you know, engaging with community and in that social work field. And again, just highlighting that there's so many, I know when we think of grants, you always think like big types of grants, but especially with the city of Toronto, and I live in Brampton, so I know with the city of Brampton and most cities, they tend to have small community-based grants. And so you could literally start small, just doing a one-day event. I remember, like I mentioned before, I grew up in the Rexdale area, and there was a couple elders that just wanted to do community gardening. And, you know, we applied for a grant, and then one day we just planted. And that now is continuing as like a food security project in the neighborhood. And even with Rise in STEM, when I had started it, it wasn't necessarily me thinking I want to start an organization or the social enterprise. It was just literally like me being frustrated with my experience. And I'm like, you know what, I want to go back to my high school and, you know, just do something with the young people there. And then just from that process, it just naturally grew and rolled over into what it is today. And so just kind of starting small, and like Mama said, finding your tribe to help you build it. I think it's so important. And like just getting your foot wet, and like people had said, like fail fast. I think like just do it to kind of get over that bump to get to the next step. And like for me, that's how I kind of got into this work, by just doing it, and it just rolls over, and next thing you know, you're like, you know, part of this big community doing such great social work.
Yeah, it's a rip off the Band-Aid sort of approach. And for me, I often, like, I hype it up so much, and then I realize the Band-Aid's not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And what's on the other side of ripping off that Band-Aid is so much better. And if it's not, then let's just tie this back to food or whatever works for you. It's like, then I'll just get myself a treat, or then I'll, you know, have a good cry with a friend or what have you. But that's the worst that will happen, is either rewarding myself for trying or connecting with someone else. Christine, over to you. Oh, I can't hear you, Christine. I don't know if anyone else.
I can't hear her either.
I don't know what happened.
No, we can't hear you.
Okay, while Christine sorts that out, I think,
yes,
oh, yes.
Sorry, you can hear me? Okay, I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that. I'm sometimes asked to give talks on being an entrepreneur, and you know, students right now are very much interested in starting companies. And I do give these talks, but one of the things that I also encourage them to think about is social innovation and social entrepreneurship. And I think, you know, you can develop the same skills actually as young people, you know, or older people like myself, you know, through engaging, you know, with social issues and trying to make an impact, you know, when it comes to social issues. And, you know, that's something that I would say, first of all, you've got to think about, you know, I think Laura mentioned this earlier, what's important to you, what you care about, what you get, what brings joy to you. But I will tell you that the volunteer work, or some of the organizations that I've been involved with in my kind of role as an adoption advocate and advocate for youth in care, this has brought me just as much joy, if not more joy, than, you know, a paper that we recently had accepted. And I think in some cases, I'm making more of an impact in that area than some of my professional work. And so, you know, actually, I think it can help you balance out your life a little bit. Because, you know, we often want to think about our impact, and there you can actually make a real impact in some of these areas. I mean, you talk, you know, listening to Mami and Irene, I mean, obviously two exceptional young women making a big impact in the world. And so I would encourage you just to get out there. If there's something you're interested in, like they've said, just put yourself out there and get involved, and don't worry about getting it perfect or knowing everything. And you try something, it's not for you, you try something else. But I would say you can gain a lot of personal fulfillment and develop the same kinds of skills that you can in your professional life. So they've been great growth opportunities and life experiences for me.
Mame, over to you.
Yeah, so I wanted to actually just, I know we have like few minutes, but I honestly wanted to just end with this story because I feel like it just encapsulates everything we have spoken about. I know Irene is smiling at me. She has an idea of what I'm going to say, although she has no idea of what this is going to be. So 13 years ago when I came to Canada, um, I remember I came with very short hair and a very thick African accent, and all the students in my I guess my class really bullied me because I had an African accent. And I'll hear things like, go back to Africa, this is not where you're from, go back, and so on. And I hated school. I hate the school with a passion. I did not want to go to school. I recall there were times where I'll even call my mom and cry because at that time she was in Ghana. And I'll call her and cry that I really want to come back because the kids were bullying me. And she'd be like, no, you have to stay, and so on. And I remember there was a particular time where during recess, Irene walked up to me, and Irene and I went to the same elementary school. So at that time, Irene was, more of a popular girl. She had all the cool friends. And Irene walked up to me in recess and she was like, Mommy, are you okay? And I lied and said I was, but I wasn't. And I guess she saw it and she asked me to join her friends to play. And that really stuck with me a lot. So after elementary school, 10 years later, I walk into the Atlanta School of Public Health at University of Toronto. I walk into my social determinants of health class. I look around and guess who I see? Irene. We've not seen each other in 10 years. And I literally screamed. I was like, Irene. And then she screamed, Mommy. And then she was like, can I come and sit beside you? And I said, of course. And to be honest, no one has been so happy to see me like this before. And till date, I don't think anyone had been that happy to see me. So I was a bit confused. I was just like, why is she so happy to see me? So when she sat beside me, then she began to narrate her story. And she was like, I'm so happy to see you because during my first year of my master's program at University of Toronto, I was bullied. I had to face racism. I had to face oppression because I was the only Black student in my cohort, and I had to face a lot of discrimination. And it was almost like I had a flashback of when she walked up to me 10 years ago during recess and asked me to play with her. And I remember whispering to myself and saying, it's time for me to return the favor. And Irene and I literally sat beside each other in class. I was always like, we would call each other when we needed help in school. And that's how like our friendship basically rekindled after many years later. So I know I keep on saying that it's important to surround yourself around the right people, but Irene has played a very, very pivotal role in my life. So I just wanted to also just share that.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. There's nothing I can really say that will amplify that any further. I have goosebumps. I imagine a lot of people do too. Other people are teary. It's not just me. I think, Rebecca, if you can hear me, we have a brief survey for those of you that want to fill out because we're trying to figure out whether and how people would like to engage with this community beyond our events. So sort of in between events so that they can stay connected. So Rebecca Yang has put the link to that survey in the chat for those of you that would like to take the 60 seconds it takes to fill it out. That's a very accurate time limit. I looked at it last night. Otherwise, I think, key takeaways, you're not in it alone. Find your Irene or your Mame because they will make a difference now, and they will continue making a difference that sticks with you. We just heard it. And, we're here as a network for whatever you need. And I think, all the panelists would agree as panelists, we're here to support you all and create the space that we all hope to walk into on our first day of work, and the relationships we hope to walk into outside of work. So hopefully the sort of transparency and strategies around overcoming failure and growing are salient for all of you. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye all.